Yesterday, we heard the standardization executives and our keynote, as well as several of the panelists, speak to the breadth of challenges posed to maintaining a lethal and ready defense force. While modernizing and sustaining decades-old systems, we must also design for interoperability and modernization in our new systems. The DoD industry relationship and participation in standards development is essential to addressing these challenges in support of the 3 lines of effort defined in the National Defense Strategy: lethality, partnerships, and reform. To kick off this afternoon's program, I'm honored to introduce yet another past defense standardization executive, Mr. Lou Kratz. Mr. Kratz very recently retired, I understand, from his role as Vice President and Managing Director of Logistics and Sustainment, responsible for coordinating Lockheed Martin's life cycle management, weapon system sustainment, and logistics efforts. And prior to his time at Lockheed Martin, Mr. Kratz served as the Assistant Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Logistics Plans and Programs, where he was responsible for guiding the DoD's logistics transformation to meet the operational requirements of the 21st century. In addition to serving as Defense Standardization Executive, he also served as Chair of the NATO Lifecycle Management Group and Co-Chair of the Focused Logistics Functional Capabilities Board and the Joint Logistics Group. Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Lou Kratz for the first of 2 industry keynotes scheduled this afternoon. Mr. Kratz, please.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, and good afternoon to everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to share some thoughts with you on the pivotal role of standards in what we all refer to now as a great power competition. And I think that my presentation today will be a good segue from the information that you received yesterday and then on to the rest of the afternoon session. And I have to tell you honest truth, my sense is that we are truly in the golden age of standards. And I think our discussion this afternoon will highlight why I think that. And let me start with just a brief summary of some of our national challenges, probably building off of the lot that you heard yesterday. So in brief summary, and I'll go left to right here on this chart, our national defense strategy, as you heard, we've shifted really from counterterrorism to what we refer to now as a great power competition. We do anticipate, right, with the adversaries that we face, that we'll be seeing unprecedented speed and violence in the event of that conflict. And as many of you know, I've been in the sustainment and logistics business now for 30 years, and quite frankly, our ability to project and sustain power in that type of environment will truly stress our national system. And that's not my opinion, right? That's based on numerous studies that have been done by the Defense Science Board, CNA, the recent Congressional Task Force, that we really do have to fundamentally change how we project and sustain power as we move to the future. And then finally, there's a lot of conversation about the work that we did as a nation in World War II and our ability to mobilize. But our challenge here is that when you look at the speed of a potential conflict in the future, industry is really ill-positioned to be able to mobilize within that time window. And then you say, okay, if that's our challenge, really what's our end state? And I'm going to suggest to everyone on the call here today, our first desired end state is effective deterrence. I don't think anybody on this meeting today wants to go to war. Right? We all would like to live in peace. And the way we do that is we effectively deter our adversaries and protect our national and our allies' interests. To do that, we need to have force capabilities that will deliver greater firepower than we can deliver today with dramatically less footprint so we can get them to the fight quickly. To enable that, we need a responsive, secure global infrastructure, both physical and cyber. And one of the new challenges that we face in today's world, quite frankly, is that our global infrastructure is subject to threats and incursions all the way back to the homeland. And we've never faced that really before. We need to increase our agility across the industrial base that we can mobilize within a timely manner. And I'm going to suggest that we need some business models that enable that agility and innovation. In terms of the path forward, and I'm actually happy to report today, I think we need to work together as government and industry. And the J4 has really strapped this one on, and they're moving forward with NDIA and DTA and the Professional Services Council to try and address some of these issues. There are ongoing war games and collaborations that we want to use to be able to frame how we achieve agility in the future. And that would include assessing the infrastructure requirements, documenting the enabled business models, and growing to what I call a global repair network. And again, that's not my concept. NavAir is actually moving out very aggressively to build upon the capabilities that we as a nation and we as industry have established across the globe with our allies that we don't really capitalize on today because of different standards, different maintenance procedures, and we need to rationalize that to bring the source of capability closer to the point of need. Now, my suggestion to address all that, right, is really called strategic agility. And I think we're all familiar with the elements of what that might be, an agile innovation base, an agile production base, agile sustaining base, and I'm going to suggest that that has to be as agile as our operating forces are as we move forward. Our ability to project and sustain power, and again, first of all, to deter aggression, and then if deterrence fails, to be able to rapidly achieve overmatch. And I have to note here, when I say deter aggression, that means that it's not on PowerPoint, right? We have to have the physical capabilities to execute the national defense strategy, as well as we have to demonstrate those capabilities, whether it be in war games or exercises, so that our adversaries know that we have both the capability and the will to deter their approaches. And then finally, on the supply chains, we really do need to increase our responsiveness. The lead times within aerospace are absolutely horrendous against a potential great power threat. And if we're going to sustain the fight, we've got to bring those lead times down. And the way you do that, right, is moving the source of supply closer to the point of need. And I'm suggesting to us all here, and why I mentioned the golden age, is standards really enable all those elements of strategic agility. And if you give me a few minutes here, I'm going to highlight why I believe that to be true. So there's no doubt in anyone's mind, particularly if you listen to the presentations yesterday, we are at the same time supporting our current force. We're building the force of the future. And I think as we look to a great power competition, that building of the force of the future really becomes critical, because we can either repeat what we've done in the past, or we can specifically tailor that future force structure and capabilities, right, to be able to meet that urgent need. And three things that stick out to me in particular. First, the joint adaptive distributed operations concept, which is really guiding the department and industry today in terms of investments and modernization. The ability to bring all the joint capabilities together, to network across multiple and dispersed platforms, to be able to enhance the capability of the kill chain and to provide effective deterrence. Second, our huge investment nationally in autonomous systems, and the recognition that future force will have a significant amount of autonomous systems in it as we move forward. Now, particularly related to standards, this causes a great challenge for us as a community, because we can control one autonomous system, or we can control a couple autonomous systems. I think we're yet to develop and to demonstrate the ability to control multiple systems in a coordinated fashion in order to achieve the end games that we want to achieve. And so that's a emerging requirement, I think, that we all need to reflect upon. And then finally, if we get the top two right, That will allow us as industry and government to work together to design what I call systems that are specifically tailored to a great power competition. And if you'll bear with me here for a couple minutes, I want to just briefly touch on each one of these in a little more detail. So let me start with JADO, and I will concentrate on the sustainment side because I think the investment streams are ongoing. If you look at our current national capabilities, we really do have a lot of platform-specific solutions for sustainment. Most of them involve relatively large logistics footprints, and although we've been working on it for 15 years, we still have some gaps in our asset visibility. And so our ability to provide the commander with near real-time information about both his supplies and his weapon system readiness is somewhat limited. In order to meet the real requirements of great power competition, you can kind of look to the future, and what does that involve? Well, that would enable us to have fleet sustainment command and control capabilities that provide comprehensive asset visibility to both the national base as well as the combatant commanders, systems that are inherently self-healing, both electronically and physically, extensive use of onboard diagnostics and artificial intelligence to predict weapon system readiness and maintenance requirements, and then full use of point of need manufacturing or additive manufacturing, if you will, autonomous systems to provide sustainment support, and remote maintenance capabilities. And if you tie all those sort of together from that really top level vision, what that should provide us with is an integrated, resilient, and responsive logistics and sustainment capability within an A2 AD environment that we all envision as part of the future. I mentioned autonomous systems and the huge investment that we're making, and I want to delve into that a little bit more, specifically to talk about some of the standards. I anticipate that the use of autonomous systems will be driven largely by our desire to reduce manpower, right? To reduce manpower that's in the fight, right? So we reduce our vulnerability, but also when you reduce the direct manpower, that has a secondary and tertiary effect because we have to move less fuel, we have to move less food, water, the force structure and force protection capabilities. So there's a lot of benefit and multipliers associated with the autonomous systems. But as I mentioned, we're moving the technology a little bit faster than I think some of the standards are. And as you look at the applications, both within the operational construct as well as in the supporting infrastructure, I see an emerging need for standards across the specific domain applications, across multi-dimensional applications so that we can coordinate movement of autonomous systems and fire control, and quite frankly, functional. And in the functional area, the example I'll use is kind of the factory of the future. There's a huge investment within industry today to increase the use of autonomous systems and within our factories, but there's very limited standards in terms of how we can integrate from multiple autonomous system providers into an integrated, coherent factory flow. And I think that's one of the areas that we're really going to have to push forward together, right, in order to get industry agility up to the point that we need it for the future. And then finally, I think if we get those first two right, you can see emerging our capability to design, develop, and field systems that are specifically identified for great power support. And you see from this graphic the release of the swarm. Okay, to be able to control the swarm or multiple swarms in a combat environment, we need to be able to have the standards that allow both the information flow as well as the real-time situational awareness within the swarms and across the swarms to be fed back to our our command structures. And that will come with standards, right? So again, I think that we have a target-rich environment as we look forward to the next couple years. I'm fairly confident in our ability to work together as industry and government, and a couple of areas I'd just like to highlight to make that effective. First, I know that the department is moving forward with acquisition reform and streamlining and a focus on agile development and execution. Industry needs to work with you to ensure that we can match, right, the agility on both sides of the buyer-seller relationship here, and then to capitalize really finally, I think, on open systems and continuous tech insertion. You know, we've talked about open systems for more than a decade, but we really need to move at this point to capitalize on that and allow ourselves to design and build to the future as opposed to trying to chase parts that are 20, 30, 40 years old. And this is where the business models really come in that allow us to do that as we move forward. And then finally, the enabling standards to achieve both of those without moving backwards, right? So the standards that I envision in the future both enable and enhance agile development and agile acquisition while achieving and capitalizing on open systems and continuous tech insertion. So from my point of view, and again, I'm just a retired guy now, but I think seeing both sides from industry and government, the first thing I would ask this community to do is really step up and champion the standards for the future. There's a lot of areas where, you know, through innovation, we've got a lot of promising technology, but every once in a while we get a little sloppy, right? And we push forward with the technology and the standards kind of have to catch up. I think we need to get ahead of that curve collectively so that industry can optimize their investments in the technology and move forward in a coherent manner. Second, I think, you know, we still need a little energy to enforce some of the current standards that we have. And I know particularly the department has been quite energetic, right, in developing and supporting organizations that are developing standards for things like autonomous systems. And I think the relationship with the standards bodies has been excellent in that regard. We need to capitalize on those standards as they mature and enforce their application. And I would never suggest going back 30 years, but it really does help industry to kind of key their investments if we know the standards that we're building against. And then finally, you know, we mentioned supporting the current fleet as we move to the future fleet. That means we have to proactively address, you know, diminishing manufacturing sources and really get ahead of that. One way to do that is continuous tech insertion. The other way to do that, right, is through re-engineering competitively. And I will make the point that I think the open systems allows us to draw upon a much broader and richer competitive industrial base to meet the needs of our warfighters. And let me just wrap up here with a couple of comments. I really believe that if we can move forward and get an agile infrastructure, which includes both government and industry, industrial capabilities, as well as the infrastructure to deliver that, we will be able to deliver and project our capabilities in a global power competition. I do think we need to do some more work on the business models. And again, we need to be able, and this is specifically a standards related issue, we need to come to grips with the different maintenance procedures and engineering procedures that are used across the globe by our allies on the same equipment, right? So we have capabilities that were bought and paid for either by the US government or by our allied partners to put maintenance capability in their countries. They've grown a little bit apart, right, because they have different standards. We need to start bringing that together to enable us as a nation to capitalize on that capability because it's closer to the point of need in many cases. And then finally, I want to foot stomp international standards that enable agility. And I want to be very clear here. This is not a political statement. It's just a statement of pragmatic reality. We rarely fight alone. In fact, we normally call upon our allies so that we have coalitions moving forward. We have industrial capability with our allies, and we have innovation across the democratic Western nations that we need to be able to draw upon globally in order to meet the threats of a great power competition. And that all requires international standards to be able to move forward. And with that, those are kind of my initial thoughts and comments. I would welcome any questions from the audience.
Okay, Mr. Kratz, I do have one question that came in. And the question is, you state that technology is often ahead of standards development. How can we encourage the DoD and industry to get involved when quite often they are trying to protect proprietary technology?
Yeah, so I'm probably going to get in trouble with some of my industry brothers and sisters. I understand completely the investment streams associated with proprietary information and proprietary solutions. That's why I said we really need to get ahead on the standard side, so that as they make those investments, they're being built against common accepted standards, which then will allow us to capitalize on the industrial investment while at the same time ensuring that it'll fit within the broader joint adaptive distributed activities. I do think that, quite frankly, sometimes the proprietary card is overplayed. And I know the department has been quite aggressive over the last 5 years, sort of challenging that. And I think that tension is actually healthy. It's healthy for industry, it's healthy for the government, but we all need to recognize the threat environment that we're facing over the next 10 to 15 years is pretty severe. And you can protect your proprietary information until the cows come home. It's not going to be worth anything if we lose a major conflict or we fail to deter an aggressor. So we're all in this together. We need to figure out how to move forward together. But the key underlying there is I think the standards get ahead of the industry investment.
Okay, thank you. That's the only, I have another question just popped in. When you mention the international standards, are you also including the S series, such as S1000D, S2000M, S3000L, and so on?
I don't know who asked that question, but thank you for that. Yes, I am, and I'll just offer my own personal note now because I have no industrial responsibility today. I'm a huge fan of S1000D. I have been for years. It frustrates me that we're not moving faster. And when I say we, I mean we, the industrial providers. We need to get on with this and start moving forward very rapidly.
Good enough. Mr. Best says you're welcome.
Thank you.
I don't see, let me just check to see if any came in via email. Nope. Just give it another minute. Going once, going twice. I think that's all the questions we have. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Mr. Kratz, for sharing your time with us today and your perspective from your experience in both the government and industry. We really appreciate it.
It was a great pleasure, and at the risk of really beating everyone into submission, it's nice to be called back out of the retirement pasture. So it's great being with you today, and thank you so much.